Good evening, my curious friends. Tonight, draw the curtains, lower the lights, and settle yourself somewhere comfortable, for we are taking a slower walk into the strange. Not a quick glimpse, not a fleeting whisper. Tonight, we shall linger. We are opening a cabinet of peculiar old folklore, charms buried beneath hearths, guardians of churchyards, grim customs for the dead, household secrets sealed inside walls, and goblins so unpleasant, well, they make one appreciate the quiet dignity of an ordinary ghost. These are not grand legends of shining heroes and golden swords. No. These are the smaller, darker stories, the sort of tales that cling to old cottages, lonely roads, ruined towers, and churchyards where the yew trees have been standing longer than anyone cares to remember. They come from a time when people lived much closer to the dark. A time when illness, misfortune, death, bad luck, and strange noises in the walls could not always be explained away with science, plumbing, or a polite shrug. And so, people made charms. They whispered warnings. They buried things. They watched the lanes at night. They listened for dogs in the churchyard. They believed, perhaps quite sensibly, that the world had edges, and that one should be careful near them. So, pour something warm, settle in, and let us begin. In old England, if a person believed they had been cursed by a witch, they did not always run immediately to the church, nor did they always confront the suspected witch face to face. No, sometimes they went to the kitchen. They took a bottle, often a stoneware jug, sometimes a glass vessel, and filled it with intimate and unpleasant things. Bent pins, rusted nails, human hair, fingernail clippings, and, most famously, urine from the person who believed themselves bewitched. Then, the bottle was sealed tight and buried beneath the hearth, hidden under the floorboards or tucked inside the walls of the house. The idea was not merely to protect the victim. It was to trap the curse, to draw the witch's magic back into the bottle, where the sharp pins and nails would torment the spell, and perhaps even torment the witch who had cast it. Imagine that, a family sitting beside the fire, speaking in low voices, while beneath their feet a little bottle of fear and vengeance quietly waits in the dark. And these are not only stories. Witch bottles have been discovered centuries later, still sealed. Builders have uncovered them in old houses. Archaeologists have found them buried beneath thresholds, hearths, and walls. A little household charm, hidden away by people who were quite convinced that unseen forces were moving against them. To us, it may seem grotesque. To them, it was insurance. Because when your cow stopped giving milk, your child fell ill, your butter refused to churn, or your luck suddenly seemed to rot on the branch, it was not always enough to say, "These things happen." Sometimes someone had to be blamed. And in a village, Blame is a dangerous little creature. It creeps from house to house. It listens at windows. It notices who was muttering near the gate last Tuesday, and whose glance lingered a little too long upon the baby's cradle. Perhaps it was the old woman at the edge of the village. Perhaps the neighbor, who was never quite friendly enough. Perhaps the widow, who owned too many cats and knew too much about herbs. Or perhaps no one had done anything at all. But fear rarely waits for evidence. So, the household prepared the bottle. The pins went in. The nails went in. The hair went in. The urine went in. Then it was sealed, buried, and left to do its quiet work beneath the floor. There was something very revealing about the witch bottle. It was not grand magic, not a wizard's spell, not a ritual performed on a hill beneath a blood moon. It was domestic magic, kitchen magic, fear with a cork in it. And that, I think, is what makes it so unsettling. The terror was not far away in some ruined castle. It was at home, in the churn, in the cradle, in the fire, in the walls. And beneath the hearth, something was waiting to catch it. There was once a strange and sorrowful custom in parts of Britain and Wales. When a person died, especially someone poor, isolated, or feared to have died with sins unconfessed, a man might be summoned to the house. He was not a priest. He was not family. He was the sin-eater. A piece of bread would be placed upon the chest of the corpse, sometimes with salt, sometimes with ale. The sin-eater would stand over the dead, say a form of prayer or charm, and then eat the bread. By doing so, he was believed to take the sins of the deceased into himself. The dead soul went free. The living man carried the burden. And after this act, the sin-eater was usually paid a small fee and sent away. Not thanked warmly, not embraced, not invited to sit by the fire and share supper with the grieving family. Quite the opposite. He was often feared, shunned, and despised. After all, if he had eaten the sins of many dead people, what kind of soul must he have carried inside him? There is something deeply tragic in that image. A poor cottage, a body laid out beneath a sheet, candles burning low, the family gathered in silence, watching as this strange man leans over the dead and eats a piece of bread that no one else would dare touch. A meal of guilt, a mouthful of the dead, a transaction between fear and mercy. It is easy to dismiss the custom as superstition, yet beneath it lies something terribly human. The fear that we might leave this world unfinished, that our wrongs might cling to us, that death might arrive before confession, forgiveness, or peace. And so, someone was paid to swallow the darkness, not because people loved him, but because they needed him. One wonders what kind of person became a sin-eater. Was he desperate? Was he hungry? Was he already an outcast, willing to carry a little more contempt in exchange for a coin and a meal? Or did he believe in what he was doing? That is the part that lingers. Imagine believing, truly believing, that each piece of bread brought another soul's sins into your own body. Each funeral, another stain. Each meal, another burden. And still, you came when cold. Still, you stood over the dead. Still, you ate. In a strange way, the sin-eater was both cursed and necessary, a figure of pity and fear, someone standing at the edge of the community, yet performing one of its most intimate duties. He was not allowed fully among the living, but he was called when the dead needed him. That is a lonely profession. And perhaps the most haunting thing is not that people believed sins could be eaten. It is that they believed someone else could be made to carry them. Every old churchyard needs a guardian. At least, that is what people once believed. And in parts of England and Scandinavia, that guardian was known as the Church Grim. It was often said to appear as a great black dog, larger than any ordinary hound, with burning eyes and a grave, watchful silence. It roamed the churchyard at night, protecting the dead from thieves and vandals and witches, and perhaps things worse than witches. But how did a churchyard get such a guardian? Here the story grows darker. Some traditions claimed that when a new church was built, an animal might be buried beneath the foundations as a spiritual protector. A dog, a lamb, a pig, even a horse. Its spirit would remain bound to the place, guarding the church and its dead for generations. A cruel bargain, certainly, but old protective magic was often cruel. The Church Grim was not always evil. In fact, it was often the opposite. A solemn sentinel, a black shape between the graves, something that did not belong to hell, but did not belong entirely to heaven either. Some said the first person buried in a new churchyard had to guard it until the next burial. To spare a human soul from that burden, an animal was buried first. And thus the Grim began its watch. There are many black dogs in British folklore. Some are omens of death. Some are devils. Some are restless spirits, but the Church Grim feels different. Not hunting, or not howling, simply watching. Picture it now. An old stone church at midnight, rain on the path, yew trees black against the moon, tilted gravestones shining faintly in the damp, the church door locked, the village asleep. And there, between the graves, a large black dog lifts its head. It has been there longer than anyone remembers, longer than the current vicar, longer than the oldest family name on the nearest stone. It has watched generations arrive beneath black cloth and leave beneath grass. It has seen mourners weep, children dare each other to touch the church gate, lovers whisper where they should not, and thieves reconsider their plans. It knows the dead by name, and it knows when someone living does not belong there. That, I think, is what gives the church grim its peculiar power. It is frightening, yes, but not because it is chaotic. Quite the opposite. It is frightening because it has a duty. A monster may be reasoned with, perhaps. A ghost may be pitied. But a guardian does not need to hate you. It merely needs to decide that you are trespassing, and in the old stories, that decision could be quite enough. So, if you ever find yourself passing a churchyard late at night and hear the soft pad of paws behind the wall, perhaps do not look too closely between the stones. Some guardians prefer not to be noticed. When old houses are renovated, strange things sometimes fall out of the walls. Old shoes, children's toys, scraps of newspaper, bottles, bones, and every so often the dried body of a cat. In Britain and parts of Europe, mummified cats have been found hidden inside old buildings, under floors, above ceilings, near chimneys, and within walls. Some may have crawled there by accident, but others, well, they appear to have been placed there deliberately. Why? Protection. A cat hidden in the house was believed by some to ward off witches, rats, evil spirits, bad luck, and creeping things that did not knock before entering. In life, cats hunted vermin. In death, perhaps, they hunted something far less visible. The chimney was an especially dangerous place in old superstition. It was an opening, a gap between outside and inside. Witches were thought to enter through such places. Spirits, too. Bad luck, smoke, whispers, disease, all the invisible nuisances of the world might find their way down a chimney. So, a cat was placed there as a guardian, a small hunter in the dark. What makes this custom so unsettling is not only the dead animal, but the intention behind it. Someone held that cat. Someone placed it behind the wall. Someone sealed it away and perhaps slept better that night, believing the house was now protected. And centuries later, a builder removes a board, shines a torch inside, and finds a curled shape waiting in the dust. A charm, a sacrifice, a secret the house kept longer than any of its owners. There is something deeply eerie about hidden objects in old houses. They make the building feel less like a structure and more like a body with memories, a body with things buried inside it. The walls become skin, the beams become bones, the chimney becomes a throat, and somewhere within that body, a cat waits silently for the next generation to discover what the previous one feared. We modern people like to think our homes are practical places. Brick, timber, plaster, wiring, insulation. Sensible things. Measurable things. Things with invoices. But old houses were not always treated so simply. They were protected, fed, marked, blessed, armed. A shoe behind a wall, a bottle beneath the hearth, a cat near the chimney, each object a little negotiation with the unseen world. Leave this house alone. That was the message. And perhaps, if the house still stands after 200 years, one might be careful before laughing too loudly at the method. Among the strangest objects in European folklore is the Hand of Glory. It was said to be the severed hand of a hanged man, often the left hand, dried and prepared through various unpleasant methods, then used as a candle holder or magical tool by thieves. Yes, as a candle holder. According to the tales, when the fingers were lit, or when a candle made from the fat of the dead was placed in its grip, the Hand of Glory could render the occupants of a house motionless, unable to wake, unable to cry out, unable to stop the burglar moving quietly through their rooms. Some versions say each burning finger corresponded to a sleeping person in the house. If one finger refused to light, someone inside was still awake. What a deeply horrible little piece of criminal folklore. It is not enough that someone breaks into your house. No, they must do so carrying the preserved hand of an executed corpse, glowing in the dark like a lantern from hell. The Hand of Glory sits at that peculiar crossroads where crime, magic, death, and superstition all meet. It tells us that fear of burglary was not merely practical, it was supernatural. A thief was not only someone with a crowbar and a sack. He might have charms, dead men's fingers, a pact with forces you could not resist. Imagine waking in the night, or trying to wake, and finding that you cannot move. Downstairs, a faint light passes under the door. Not the warm light of a candle carried by someone familiar. Something lower, something stranger. A light held in a hand that is no longer attached to any living body. Floorboards creak. A drawer opens. Silver shifts. And you lie there in the dark, fully aware, unable to move, while a dead man's hand keeps you obediently still. There are, of course, many sensible explanations for such tales. Sleep paralysis, criminal myth-making, moral panic, the natural human desire to make thieves seem more sinister than they already are. But folklore is not only a record of what people believed, it is a record of what they feared. And the Hand of Glory, it is a perfect little nightmare because it violates so many boundaries at once. The dead used by the living, a human body turned into a tool, a home invaded, sleep poisoned, safety undone. The hand should be in a grave. The candle, it should be in a church. The thief should be outside. But in this story, all three have come into your house. There are fairies, and then there are redcaps. And if your idea of fairies involves delicate wings, flower crowns, and polite little dances in the garden, I regret to inform you that the old borderlands had something rather less charming in mind. The redcap was a vicious goblin sent to haunt ruined castles, old towers, and places where violence had been done. It was small, ugly, fast, terribly strong. It wore iron boots. It carried a pike or a blade. And upon its head was a cap dyed with red human blood. Not once, not symbolically, repeatedly. Because, according to the tales, if the blood in the red cap's hat dried, the creature would die. And so it had to kill again and again to keep its hat wet and bright. There was something wonderfully horrible about that detail. Not killing for treasure, and not killing for revenge. Killing for maintenance. A goblin with jaws. But do not let that amuse you too much. In the stories, redcaps were dangerous creatures indeed. They lurked among ruins and attacked travellers who came too close. You could not outrun them easily, despite their heavy iron boots. They were swift, brutal, and relentless. Holy words or the sight of a cross might drive them away in some versions, but one imagines it was better not to test this. The redcap belongs to a harsher kind of folklore, the kind born in border country, where raids, blood feuds, ruined fortresses, and sudden death were not merely stories. They were memories. A ruined castle is already unsettling, but add to it a little goblin in iron boots, crouching in the dark, wringing blood into his hat, and suddenly the stones seem a touch less picturesque. You can almost see the scene. A traveller taking shelter near an old tower as the evening closes in. The roof long gone. The walls broken. Grass growing where men once shouted orders and drew steel. Then from somewhere inside the ruin comes a sound. Not a noble ghost. Not a sighing lady in white. A scrape. A shuffle. The clank of iron boots on stone. And then 2 bright little eyes appear in the dark. The redcap is not elegant. It is not mysterious in the romantic sense. It has no tragic backstory, no sorrowful curse, no poetic yearning beneath the moon. It is appetite in a cap. A reminder that not all old folklore is delicate, symbolic, or morally complicated. Some of it simply says, do not go into the ruins after dark. Something nasty lives there. And there we are, my friends. 6 little journeys through the odd, the eerie, the folkloric, and the forgotten. A bottle beneath the hearth, a man who ate the sins of the dead, a black dog keeping watch among the graves, a cat sealed inside the walls, a corpse's hand turned into a thief's lantern, and a murderous little goblin in iron boots, desperately trying to keep his hat damp. It does make one appreciate a quiet evening at home. But that, I think, is what makes these stories so fascinating. They are not merely tales of monsters, witches, charms, curses, and things that go bump in the night. They are little windows into the minds of those who came before us. People who tried to make sense of misfortune, death, illness, luck, love, fear, and all the strange happenings that refuse to fit neatly into daylight. And whether we laugh at their superstitions, shiver at their stories, or quietly admit that some of them still feel rather convincing. They remain part of us, because the old world is not gone, not entirely. It lingers in the stones of ruined towers, in the churchyards no one likes to cross after dark, in the bottles found beneath hearths, in the things hidden behind plaster, in the stories told by candlelight when the weather turns unpleasant. And perhaps now, and then, in the quietest hour of the night, it lingers in us. If you enjoyed this longer journey into the curious and the uncanny, do consider subscribing, leaving a like, and telling me in the comments which tale unsettled you the most. There will, of course, be more. There always is. Until then, keep it cozy, keep it classy, and keep a little mystery. Goodbye.